We did it. In an effort to stop Halqifibrax, we have banned all the tuners. That's a tough call to make, sir. But between you and me, I think it's the right one. No cost is too steep to ensure that our children grow up in a world without Halqifibrax, even if it means banning all the tuners. Yep. Every tuner. Hold on. you just, the way that you said that, it makes me feel like maybe you didn't ban all the tuners. You did ban all the tuners, right? Okay, I mean, I shouldn't even mention it. It's not even worth worrying about, but the new set does have some Rose Dragon support for the horny Akiza fans to salivate over. It's really not even worth mentioning. There's no chance that... Hey, I'm back, baby! Good afternoon, Jank enthusiasts. I'm MBT, and this is 10-Minute Testing. Konami doesn't trust Americans. After all, why should they? TCG players have shown time and time again they're more excited to play Click Yes Turbo than Yu-Gi-Oh! So when new decks arrive stateside, more often than not, Daddy Konami will hold our little hand the entire way by way of archetype names. Here, you stupid Americans, they'll say, we put Virtual World in front of all the cards you're supposed to play. Don't screw it up! Because of this, we don't often get to show off a deck that's made not of every card in the archetype X3, but of incidental synergies and neat little interactions. Here's one of those. Presenting Kitchen Sink. So here's the list. This deck is heavily inspired by Bellarke's top 16 finish in the January 2022 Chalice Line Monthly. I've made a couple of changes. As always, I'll give you a background about the archetype, a little bit of a discussion about what I hope the deck can do, and of course the card by card. But first, this video is sponsored by Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro Deck. Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro Deck is the pack opening website that everyone's using for their progression series, but you might have also missed that it's got a deck builder, a card database, and a wealth of strategy articles. I personally use it to post the Chalice Line Monthly deck breakdowns. Give it a look at www.ygoprodeck.com. Now let's talk about this. Right now in the OCG, one of the top decks is Adventurer TENYI, or TENYI SWORDSOUL Rose Dragon, or Halqifibrax Synchron Mecha Phantom Beast Danglong Barone Turbo. It's a deck that sort of defies classification, but its game plan is pretty simple. You use a level 7 monster and a level 3 tuner to make Barone before committing to really powerful synchro plays by way of Halqifibrax and AURORADON. See, this was always an option, but 3 things have made it a lot easier to play than it has been in the past. The first is the release of the Adventure Engine, which sets up an Omni-Negate in Wandering Griffin Rider who, oh look, just so happens to be a level 7 monster. Because of this, it's possible to perform the entire combo under an Omni-Negate as long as your Fateful Adventure resolves. The second is the Rose Dragons. Previously only notable because of their application in silly FTKs, this series of Synchro enablers represents 3 material from 1 normal summon. Their extremely advantageous star line makes them a necessary inclusion, and you don't even have to resolve red until Barone is on board. The third is the ban list. 3 emergency teleport alongside a format where Ghost Ogre is actually playable means you can start your synchros without even committing to a normal summon. Notably, this deck looks radically different than it does in the OCG. I don't expect this is the optimal build of the deck. It's possible as it becomes popular, it will even change radically. See, the OCG version of this deck has Protoss, Danglong, O-Lion, Jet Synchron, and Galaxy Tomahawk, so we are missing a few pieces. That said, I think this build is still a fine proof of concept for the strategy. Clearly, these interactions are strong enough to build around, and clearly I'll be losing to it at locals in the near future. So with that, let's get into the card by card. First up are the Tenyis. We only really want to be playing the 7s because that's just how the stat line works out. We've got 3 copies of Ashana, 3 copies of Vashetta, and 1 Adhara. Ashana is, of course, incredibly powerful and can extend you with Adhara into additional pieces of interaction, and Vashetta is excellent going second as a way to blank your opponent's onboard tricks. After that, we've got one of the most pushed cards I've ever seen in my entire life, Water Enchantress of the Temple. This card is the entire adventure line. Just a 1-card combo you can activate from your hand, banishing it, and if you brick into multiple copies, you can always just summon them to your side of the field. We've got a Wandering Griffin Rider in here as well, part of the adventure setup, and also happens to be both a level 7 and an Omni-Negate. You can sync this away if you so desire with Red Rose Dragon. If this card sent to the graveyard as synchro material, you can special a Rose Dragon from your hand or deck. You'll be picking up Rox Rose Dragon, which on normal or special allows you to add a card that specifically lists Black Rose Dragon in its text text from your deck to your hand. We'll get to its target in a second. For hand traps, I'm on 3 Ash Blossom and 3 Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit. Level 3 tuner hand traps are the name of the game because they can start your combos in a pinch. Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit specifically is very good against the Adventurer setups and very good in a format where E-Telly's at 3. Finally, we've got 1 Longwan and 1 Taya. These are searchable over the course of your combo, so if you want either one, you can very easily find them. 1 copy of Destrudo, the Lost Dragon's Frisian. This is a piece of banned material that we have access to and the OCG doesn't, and it makes extension a cinch if your opponent stops you too many times. We've got a copy of Deskbot 001 for AURORADON setups. Mecha Phantom Beast Warblerin. This card is very strange. It's not exactly O-Lion, but it does do some interesting things with AURORADON. You don't get to go into 8s as you would with O-Lion, but you get to go into 7s, and it turns out Yazi is secretly also an 8. We've got a Hop Ear Squadron in here as well because Cupid Pitch Lines can search it. For spells, we've got 3 Rite of Aramasir. This card's obviously extremely pushed. 1 Fateful Adventure, 1 Dracoback the Rideable Dragon, 3 Emergency Teleport, your Rocks Rose target, Basil Rose Shoot, a Quick Play Reanimation spell for Rose Dragons, a Foolish Burial, a Called by the Grave, and a searchable Sword Soul Blackout. The extra is completely lifted from Bellark. We have Chang Ying, of course, very powerful card, and most of your end boards do get to stop with this guy. 1 copy of Baron de Fleur, 1 copy of Satellite Warrior, a fantastic thing to go into off of a spent Borreload Savage Dragon or Chi-Xiao. 1 copy of Chaofeng. This usually goes light, which means that anyone trying to Nibiru you is going to have a really rough time. We have a copy of Borreload Savage Dragon, a Sword Soul Grandmaster Chi-Xiao, a Baxia. Baxia is a weird inclusion in here. It's obviously very good at preventing your opponent from putting on-board interaction before you get to anything that's actually important, but it's really, really important as an 8-star Yangzing that you can use to make Chi-Xiao. After that, we've got Yazi, and Yazi is... wow. I mean, they should probably consider banning this card. Its interactions with Baron and AURORADON specifically are unmatched. The fact that you can destroy it on your first turn using your own cards to go get a Taya and go into Chi-Xiao is unbelievable. And on the draw, the fact that you can make it off of a Destrudo to completely OTK your opponent if you dedicate the main deck space to Mare Mare is very frustrating. Cupid Pitch is not usually what you want to be going into, but if you're stopped multiple times, sometimes a Borreload Savage Dragon with a couple of negates and a Hop-Eared Squadron is good enough. We don't have Galaxy Tomahawk, but we do have Mecha Phantom Beast Dracosack. It's not 5 material, but it is 3, which isn't terrible. Speaking of Mecha Phantom Beasts, we've got AURORADON X2 because you can go into it turns 2 and 3 very easily. 1 Crystron Hauka Fibrax, 1 Barricade Borg Blocker, this comes up constantly, and 1 Monk of the Tenyi. So with that, let's check out the games. Our first match is up against Gladiator Beast Tri-Brigade, though honestly, because they lost the die roll and they did not open a hand trap, we might as well be playing against Gate Guardian. This hand is good enough. It's not exactly what we want to see. Obviously, you don't want the Fateful Adventure in your opener, but about 20% of the deck is soft garnets. So at some point, you're going to have to look at an opener that contains cards like this and suck it up. Now, this is a little counterintuitive. We are going to go for the adventure line, but we have so much stuff that while we are going to set up 001, we're not actually going to summon it to our side of the field at any point. We'll go for the Vashutta and then normal summon a Ghost Ogre so we can go into Barone and ensure that our Fateful Adventure resolves. We'll go for the Fateful and then fire off an Emergency Teleport. This triggers the Fateful and gets a Draco back to our hand. From here, we can activate the Fateful in order to get a copy of Wandering Griffin Rider, pitching the Draco back and then re-equipping it from the graveyard. Why is it allowed to do this? We'll activate the effect of Wandering Griffin Rider and then make Hauka Fibrax. We'll use that to get a 001, and now we are off to the races with AURORADON. Now, we don't have the zones to reanimate the 001, but it's not too much of a problem, because here we can activate the effect of AURORADON in order to send 2 cards from our side of the field to the graveyard to make Warblerin, and then go into a Yazi. We'll use Baron's effect to pop the Yazi, then trigger the Yazi to get a copy of Taya from deck. We'll trigger Taya, banishing the Yazi to get a token to our side of the field, then we'll go into a Chi-Xiao, triggering that effect and the Taya effect to set up for next turn with a Nishana and get ourselves a copy of Blackout. We'll set the Blackout and pass back to our opponent. Our opponent draws for turn, and that probably does not do it. They're going to begin with a Proving Ground. They will normal summon a Salmonite and then special summon a Test Tiger. They'll activate Test Tiger so they can go into a copy of Augustus. We will negate the effect of Augustus, and that means that the battle phase effect will be off too, so our opponent is going to concede. Our second match is up against Punk Virtual World, and this is such an interesting take on the VW archetype. I hope it becomes standard. We've opened Okay, but you can see that we're missing the adventure half of our deck. This showcases what happens when you don't have access to those extremely broken cards, and your line is at risk of being interrupted. We're going to begin with a copy of Ashana and a copy of Red Rose Dragon. We go into Barone before we commit to the Red Rose Dragon, and our opponent fires an Ash anyway. Rather than negate the Ash, I think because we've drawn the Basil Rose Shoot, we could just bring back the Red Rose Dragon, then E-Telly into a copy of Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, preserving our negate for our really, really high roll Hauka Fibrax line. So from here, we're going to go into an Auroradon. We'll activate the effect, summoning 3 tokens to our side of the field. This triggers the 0/0/1 in graveyard, and let's do something just a little bit different. We're going to go into a Yazi. We'll activate Baroness, targeting the Yazi, destroying the Yazi, and getting a copy of Taya from deck. From here, we're going to activate the effect of Taya for a token, but because we have an Ashana in graveyard, we can now go for a copy of Warblurin, activate the Ashana to get a Hashada from deck, then Synchro summon a Chishu, activating the Chishu and the Taya in sequence to send a copy of Adhara to the graveyard. This allows us to then Synchro summon a copy of Baxia, destroying our Dracoback that we cannot use to bring back the Adhara, and Synchro summon a light Chowfang. We'll pass back to our opponent with the Blackout set, and they're going to begin with a copy of Kaloon. We don't negate the Kaloon, and, that's just the way it is, I suppose. They'll go for... There's no way this card is actually called Seaman. Hold up. Well, regardless, they cannot summon the card that they searched because it's light. They'll go into Fortune Tune, and a way you clear this board is by making Zeus, which unfortunately cannot do anything under Chowfang. Well, it's time for Game 3, and you know what that means, a best of 3 versus meta. Our opponent's playing Adventure Phantom Knight, and get used to hearing that sentence. This isn't a fantastic open from our opponent, but it's good enough. They're going to begin with a copy of Tornscale, pitching a copy of Ragged Gloves to send a copy of Fogblade. The Ragged Gloves to send an Ancient Cloak for a copy of Silent Boots, then summon the Silent Boots. Good enough. They'll go into a Cherubini, sending a copy of Graph to the graveyard, and then summoning a copy of Seer from deck. From here, they can link summon into a copy of Rusty Bardish, and then trigger the Seer effect in graveyard to bring back the Cherubini. They're going to activate the effect of Rusty Bardish, sending a copy of Tornscale to get a copy of Shade Brigandine to their side of the field. They will Fogblade back this copy of Silent Booch, which triggers the Tornscale engrave as well. They'll go for the Shade Brigandine here, and then that's enough material to make both Dagda and Verte Anaconda. They'll fire the Verte, sending a Fusion Destiny and the Dasher in hand to make Destroy Phoenix Enforcer. Then they'll activate DPE, chaining the effect of the Dagda so they have a Scythe for next turn. They'll eat the Verte Anaconda, trigger the effect of the DPE engrave, set 2, and pass. So we're a Synchro deck. We need our extra. This is one of those games. Here comes the Scythe, and that is not going to be the last time I say that this format. He'll trigger the effect of the DPE in graveyard. We can maybe do something. We'll go for the right to set a copy of Journey. We're going to normal summon a copy of Red Rose, which triggers it, and we'll get a Dracoback afterwards. We'll trigger the effect of it in order to get a copy of Wandering Griffin Rider to hand, then we'll equip our monster with the Dracoback, targeting the Phantom Knights of Rusty Bardish. Our opponent is going to activate Forbidden Droplet here, which prevents us from contesting the board unless we summon the Wandering Griffin Rider in attack position, which I don't want to do because the DPE is coming back. But this is still a pretty advantageous position to be in. We'll negate the DPE with the Wandering Griffin Rider. They do get to activate the effect in graveyard, but really, who cares? They're going to set 2 in Celestial. Oh my god, into an Aramis here. Okay, that's going to start their line until we flip the Emergency Teleport. Ghost Ogre, unlike most other hand traps, can activate its effect on field. So we stop them there. They go into Nightmare Phoenix, and that's it. We actually might be able to do this. They'll pass back to us. In standby, they get back the DPE, but the onboard Dracoback contests this. The DPE goes to the graveyard and will trigger, but we're going to OTK them this turn. We'll start with a copy of Ashana. Afterwards, we're going to normal summon a copy of Taya and activate Emergency Teleport so that we can then go into a copy of Changing. We'll activate Taya, get a token, and get Fogbladed. No big deal. From here, we should be able to easily... Oh. Well, it had to be Nibiru. Okay, back to our opponent, and... that should be enough. A Fogblade bringing back the Rusty plus the DPE will kill us. So it's time for Game 2, and oh, this is a stinker. That's 4 soft garnets in the opener. Well, very few of our hands are weak to Nibiru, but we might have just found one. We'll begin with a copy of Fateful Adventure. I think we actually have to make the Water Enchantress here. Yikes. All right, we're going to go for it, and we'll get a token to our side of the field off of the Rite of Aramesia. Afterwards, we can special Vishutta, I suppose. We'll normal summon this Warblurin, and that does make Hauka Fibrax. We'll go for the Hauk in order to get a copy of 0/0/1 to our side of the field, and then make Auroradon. We'll trigger the effect of Auroradon, 3 tokens, and 1 0/0/1 in the grave, at which point our opponent drops... the huge turn-ending rock. Oh, man, I can't believe they were rewarded for that. Okay, they draw for turn, and this is the end of the game. They will special both Silent Boots and Stained Greaves before going into Cherubini. They'll trigger the effect of the Cherubini. Oh, come on. Sending an Aquamancer, which they can then activate to get a copy of Rite of Aramesia. Wow, that's rough. They'll set a copy of Fateful Adventure and grab themselves a Wandering Griffin Rider, which they can then summon in case we had a rival Nibiru waiting in the wings. They'll go for Dagda. Why? I'm not getting another turn before activating the effect of Rusty Bardish and triggering the effect of the Silent Boots in grave. They're going to activate the effect of Torn Scale in graveyard as well, and Ragged Gloves to send a copy of Fogblade before activating Ancient Cloak to add another Torn Scale to hand. They can Levier here, bringing back the Aquamancer, and then afterwards they can activate Fogblade, bringing back the Stained Greaves. That's enough material for a Break Sword, which does out the token, one of the very few ways they can actually do it if it gets too large. They'll bring back 2 monsters to their side of the field, and here's another way, Verte Anaconda. Down comes DPE, and I haven't done the math, but I am pretty sure this is well over lethal. So we're back with the deck, and yeah, I don't know, losing to Scythe Nibiru is pretty standard. Let's do the pros and cons. First, the pros. 1, there's very clearly something here. The ability to make a board more powerful than Sword Souls with no chance of negation is absolutely unmatched. 2, the Adventure Engine is one of the most broken collections of cards I have ever seen in my life. Even if everything else gets interrupted, often an Omni Negate and a bounce is enough to win the game on its own. And 3, there are very few hands that can't do anything. Even its worst bricks end on Baron plus Borreload. And the cons. 1, it's really hard to play. I'm sure I'm not even playing optimally here. There's a lot of lines that require you not only to use your monsters as efficiently as possible, but also anticipate what your opponent has in hand. 2, it's actually not particularly good at rebuilding. There aren't a ton of options in the extra deck, especially since so much of your extension worm locks. And 3, the lack of Olion really hurts. It's possible a Cult Wing setup might be better than Warblorin, but honestly it's a zones problem, not an extenders one. All in all, this diamond needs to be polished, preferably by someone much smarter than me. This deck is still a little loose, and the lines aren't all the way labbed out. But when they are, I expect this deck will be a feared meta contender.